more and you want to have more, and there never seems to be enough. Methadone has a way of blocking that. But with prolonged use, even people I know with methadone, they're going up,
Sure.
and it doesn't have that much of a ceiling effect. The downside of it is, you have to go stand in line, once a day, 6 o'clock in the morning. But it's also cheap. It's
Right.
$5 for a full month. So you know what? A lot of people are willing to go stand in line for a $5 prescription.
Mm-hmm.
Now myself, what I used was Suboxone. And Suboxone is a combination of buprenorphine and naloxone. And the buprenorphine is an opioid, but it blocks the effect of the buprenorphine blocks the euphoric effect of the opiates, much like the methadone does. And the naloxone in it actually reverses the effect of the opiate. So when you're on it, I don't even know if they even use Antabuse anymore for alcoholics, but it used to be they give you this pill, Antabuse, and if you drink on that, you puke your guts out. So it deters you. Naloxone is kind of like that. They mix it with the Suboxone, and if you try to, use any opiates with it, it throws you into precipitated withdrawals.
Wow.
Yeah. So you have to be like off your opiates for like 24, 36 hours. You have to really be in that, that withdrawal mode.
On the way out,
yeah. For it to work. Well, I did that, and I had great success. It only took me like 3 days, and boy, it just absolutely...
It was a rough 3 days.
It was a rough 3 days.
I recall that.
It was terrible. But you know what? I got through it. And now I am on what you call Subutex, and it's the generic form of Suboxone. And that, after all my life of facing addiction and facing this and facing that, this is the first year of my life that a little over a year now, that I have been sober in 30 years. Now, I know a lot of people would say, oh, you're really not sober. You know what? To me, I am, because I'm not drinking. I'm not out scoring. I'm not living this crazy life.
Right.
I started a business. Sure. I have a ministry. I finished school. I'm living the most productive life now than I have in my entire life. And to me, this was a godsend. And I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to say, oh, you shouldn't be supporting it. But
well, it's kind of one of those maintenance drugs that if used properly, it's like someone maintaining, diabetes with insulin.
Yes.
It keeps you level. It also keeps you from going under your skin at times.
Well, it does. And along with that, too, it helps with my pain.
Right.
It helps with the pain issues that I have.
Which did not go away.
No, that didn't go away.
That is not going to go away anytime in your life soon.
No, not at all. So, I just wanted to really talk about how, there are options that you don't have to go into that by yourself. So, anyway, moving along, let's talk about you with your little brush with wasn't a little brush, it was quite
it wasn't too big. My little brush with opiates. I wound up in pain management for a shoulder that I've had some issues with throughout my life, but it was getting bad.
Mm-hmm. It really is, yeah.
Yeah, as you get older, things really do progressively get worse. Well, my shoulder is no exception. So I wound up on opiates for a while as pain management. I was very cautious on the opiates, so I definitely kept it to a low dose. But then as time went on, and I wasn't on that long, but it was long enough to have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I had talked to my doctor and said, I want to step this down. Okay, it wasn't a real high dosage, so the doctor looked at me and said, hey, that's cool. How about we cut your dosage by this much? So we did. And then usually about a week before, because being in pain management, you're showing up every month.
Mm-hmm.
They're making sure that you're not using other drugs.
Have to go through the P test, have to go through this
have
test,
to talk
and
to
that
this,
test.
talk about that. And, usually a week before my appointment, they would call and confirm and make sure I was okay.
Mm-hmm.
No phone call. And I'm sitting there going, wow, this is funny. They didn't call.
That is odd.
And so I tried to call the office for about 3 days. And I kept getting the same recording, basically not telling me a whole lot. And I'm just thinking, okay, what's going on out at the office there? This is kind of crazy. So we hopped in the car and drove, because it is a bit of a drive from here. One day after work, drove out to see what's going on. Plastered on the door of the clinic was a big sign basically saying, not as much out of business, but do not open under penalty of law type thing, sealed door. And I'm just sitting there going, wow, what happened here? I'm not exactly sure if it was a bust or if someone disappeared, didn't pay the rent.
I don't know, but that was just weird.
It was just really weird. Now,
that was strange.
Myself, I wasn't on that much, and I did seek a little bit of medical advice after that, and I was at a dosage low enough that I could go off it. Now, going off it did mean that I did get to experience some nifty little withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, you did for a couple months.
You have the flu symptoms for a couple of weeks.
I was surprised, but it really did affect you.
I had the kicks at night, especially my feet. They would just sit there and kick all of a sudden. Even when I was sleeping, they would kick on their own. And that was just, it was kind of crazy because I really, by the time that whole situation went down, I wasn't up to that big of a dosage. I mean, it was small, but the problem was my body was used to having that in there the whole time. But, after time, went on, I did feel better and better. I mean, it did seem to take a while.
It took you a little while, though. I mean,
it wasn't one of those, oh, no big deal. If I had the choice right now, oh, here, you could take these and you're going to go through this at the end. For the amount that I went through, I would pass. But I'm also not one who has as many issues with substances as I would say my addictions and issues are more situational. That'd be the best way to put it. I deal with more anger issues.
Which can be an addiction as well.
Well, it's triggered the same as well after reading that about triggers that really hit close to home on a few things on my front. But yeah, that was my little brush with opiates, which really, you got people out there going, no big deal. You know what? Maybe so. For me, it wasn't a big deal.
Well, I noticed that, it was starting to become more and more, and I said, you know what? I think we need to look at this here because I had already, been a little bit in trouble, and I'm like, you know what?
Well, I think at that point you were past the point of no return.
Yeah,
it would have been if it's some serious to come down at that point.
Exactly. So I think that, it's like when I quit drinking, when I moved out here, you started drinking more, you started smoking more. I was already an alcoholic, and I watched you start to mirror my behavior, and I said,
Oh, I was drinking a lot before you came out here. I'd gone through a divorce, and I could pour it down with the best of them. You could. That was one of the things. When we quit drinking, I could walk away from that no problem. But that's been the story of my life.
You have, yeah.
It isn't substances as much as it's situations.
And your father was an alcoholic.
Yes, he was.
You have other people in your family that had alcohol and drug problems as well.
I come from a bit of a dysfunctional family on top of it all.
And you really don't have it, but like you said, yours is anger.
I have anger issues that could get me in a lot of trouble if I don't keep them under control. It's just the way it is. And
you're one of those stories, with genetics that it didn't play as heavily as well. But you do have some other family members that do have some symptoms. Issues. Sure do. I myself, So how about your story a little? You got a lot of stories. So. I know. I haven't really talked about this publicly before, and it's kind of challenging to speak about. But at the same time, I think the story the story itself is, I think, going to affect a lot of people. I think people have been through something similar, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I talked with my mom about this, and I said, well, how do you feel about this? And she says, you know what, I think it's a good idea. She supports me. So I don't talk about anything that, is going to embarrass my family or cause anyone any kind of trouble. But I had experienced drugs early in my life and through alcoholism and other things like that. But I always stayed away from opiates. And even when I was at my lowest and I had been exposed to many different kinds of drugs, I never went anywhere near opiates or heroin. I just knew in the back of my mind, there are times I thought about trying it. I've seen people, do it right in front of me, several times. And mostly everyone will say, you don't want to try this. No one ever really offered it to me, but I knew I never wanted to touch that. Right. And when I started this whole thing, I'd had gallbladder surgery in my early 40s, and the doctor was going to prescribe me Percocet, and I'm like, no, I don't want to take the Percocet. And he says, no, you're going to be in a lot of pain. You're going to be in a lot of pain. You need to take this. Well, sure enough, one thing led to another, and so on and so forth. My story is, in my family, addiction is, especially in drugs, is just very, very bad. My dad was married before he married my mom, and he had 3 sons. I only knew one of them. The other 2 didn't come around too often, but all 3 were heroin addicts.
Right.
All 3. The one, and I'm not going to use any names because there may be still some people. His one son that he was closest to, he was really good looking guy. He was a great guy. I remember him as a little girl. Yeah, he was. He'd come over and he'd go fishing with my dad, and they'd hang out. And he had this most gorgeous wife, and I thought that she was just, she's still in our life. I see her and her family, and I just thought that they were just like so cool. They're like, this was in the 70s, so they had like the long hair and the flared and clothes, and they were just like, so cool. And I didn't know that he had a heroin addiction, and I don't believe his wife knew at that time either. But it progressed, and my father was a carpenter, so he had a lot of expensive tools, and periodically he would come over to borrow my dad's tools. On one particular day, he came over and poked his head in the door and told my mom, hey, you know what? I need to borrow some tools. I got a job to do. And my mom's like, okay, go ahead. Well, my dad comes home from work, and he's like, what the hell happened to the garage? We've been robbed. And my mom's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, there's nothing left. She goes, what are you talking about? So they go out there. He had taken all the tools. Ooh. And my mom drives over to his wife's house, and they're looking around, and she's finding all these pawn tickets and all these things, and he just sold everything, my dad. He pawned everything off of it for drugs. And, they're looking for him. And I remember I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I remember, people calling, where is he? And then we got that phone call that, I don't think any parent ever wants to get.
No, you don't.
Apparently, he had run out of the drugs that he had, and he went into a liquor store in Detroit, and he had a fake gun, and he was trying to hold up the store, and someone came from behind and shot him and killed him.
Yeah.
That
happens.
Yeah, it does. And, I only see my dad cry like 2 times. One, we had to put our dog down, and second, when his son was killed. And I can't imagine getting that phone call. And it was just like, it was so heartbreaking just to see that. And, and this is a story that happens all the time. And it's because these drugs drive you to do things that you never thought you would. You steal from your parents. You're holding up a store, and, next thing you know, you're shot and killed.
Right.
Well, the other 2 boys, I did not get a chance to know them, but over the years, I had thought about them. It's kind of like, when you have like a sibling or something out there, you kind of know.
Had a couple of them. Another story, another show.
Yeah. You have siblings
I have
too.
a couple of them from my dad that I'm in touch with now.
Right.
But until my dad passed away, I wasn't in touch with them.
Yeah, that's just the way things were back then. It was just kind of different. And I happened to track them down, and I found them both in prison, ironically. They were a few years older. One was in a prison in Arizona. One was in a prison in Michigan. And they both had been lifetime criminals for armed robbery, assault and battery, assault with intent to do great deadly harm. I mean, I'm looking at all these charges that they did, and I'm sitting here thinking, these are the same people that are related to me. And I'm thinking about all the things I did in my life and all the bad mistakes I made, and just the road that I went on. I mean, my dad, after losing 3 kids to this, must have looked at me and thought, what the hell did I do to deserve this? I mean, he had to just be like, what is going on here? And I think that's a case where genetics most definitely, had to play a part. And sadly, I didn't get a chance to be in touch with my brothers. The one out here, he died alone in prison.
Right.
Died alone. He was in his 50s. The other one in Michigan, he was released, and he died shortly after release. From their prison records, from the time they were 16 years old to they were 50, I counted it up, and the longest either of them were out of jail combined was 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they'd be out for like 3 months, and it was always about the drugs. Everything was breaking and entering. Everything was assault and battery, forgery, all these things.
You know,
And it was because of
it's that
drugs.
that drive
Yeah,
for those drugs. Opiates are dangerous.
it is. And
Nothing to toy with.
it's hard to imagine, coming